From the site of Noah's Ark to the depths of the Red Sea, the grandeur of Mount Sinai and the ash ruins of Sodom and Gomorrah, these and other new surprising discoveries are brought to life in this series by international explorer, archaeologist and author Jonathan Gray.
Well, here's just something I brought back with me from one of my treks down into the unexplored headwaters of the Amazon. This is from head shrinking country. What you see here is a gourd made into a container for kapok. This is looks like a knitting needle, doesn't it? But really it's a poison dart. It has a black liquid dried on the tip of it, which is curare. Very poisonous. And this is a quiver for the poison darts. They are carried in here like this, and then you pull them out. You get out some of the kapok and wrap it around the back of the blowpipe, the back of the thing that has to go in the blowpipe, which is the little dart, and that acts as a valve, pushing the air forward. Now I'm going to show you this blowpipe, which I brought back with me. This was carried for miles, tramp for days through the jungle. And it's actually hollow inside. It's two pieces of a wood put together, bound around and then covered over with bitumen or pitch found in the jungle. And the far end is narrow and the end near the mouthpiece is wide, which means that as you blow through, the pressure builds up inside, and these are very, very accurate for quite a distance. So what is done is you put the little dart inside and then you blow it. You shoot birds, animals, and well, I know that even people have been caught with this. Throughout Central and South America, there are at least 3,000 known sites of ancient cities which have not yet been excavated. South America is the most mysterious of all continents. There are immense expanses of the interior which are still not explored from the ground. Our journey is to take us into this area. Excluding the Himalayas, the Andes are the world's highest mountains. At an altitude of 12,000 feet, the landscape is bleak, cold and treeless. A chilly wind sweeps across the plateau. The pre-Inca highway system was the most daring in the world. It reached the Amazon basin, straddled lofty mountain peaks, and connected with the faraway coast. Its almost indestructible highways were paved with granite slabs. Instead of going around impossible barriers, it plunged through them in a direct line, crossing canyons and piercing mountains. These roads are still in use today. Lake Titicaca is the highest large body of navigable water in the world. Here at 12,500 feet, that's 2.5 miles above sea level, is the little town of Juliaca. Fuel is expensive because horsepower is reduced 40% at this high altitude. The strangest people of the lake are the Uros, who have hidden themselves away for centuries on these floating islands. They make their own islands from a grass reed which grows in the lake. Walking on their spongy islands gives one a sensation like trying to walk on a feather bed. You can step right through into the ice-cold lake. Their homes and the mats they sleep on are made from the same grass reed. These rushes also serve for building their boats and sails. They even eat the roots of the reed, which is about as close as most of them ever get to a vegetable salad. 300 years ago they were an oppressed tribe with no land to cultivate, so they moved out into the lake. Here they have lived, forgotten by the rest of the world. The men spend most of their time catching fish. They vary their diet by eating it fresh, dried, or baked. For years they had floating potato gardens. When they harvest the potatoes, the Indians leave them out on the ground at night to freeze. When the morning sun thaws them, the Indian women tramp on them to squeeze out the water. After 8 to 10 days of this process, the potatoes are completely dehydrated and, as one could say, well flavoured. It is freezing cold every night of the year, and the sun never gets warm in the day. Yet, until a few years ago, the inhabitants of the floating islands went stark naked. These lonely people are very suspicious of the rest of the world, and I believe that the chief purpose of the white man is to poison their fish so they will die and he can take over. The first visitors were driven away with long poles. However, barriers of fear were broken down through medical care. A missionary by the name of Bill Jamison had the old queen of the tribe lying down on a reed mat enjoying a vigorous back rub. Said Bill's friend Wellesley Moore, "We couldn't help but laugh as we watched thick layers of dirt being rubbed off. Even though the old lady had been surrounded by water all her life, she had probably never had a bath." As the children followed them around, they tried to teach them songs in Spanish language, which of course the kids did not know. Wellesley recalls, "What we heard sounded more like the moaning and groaning of animals than anything I had ever heard before. And the tune? Well, each child had a different one." Formal action was taken to build a floating school for the floating islands. A copper company donated a large number of 55-gallon steel drums, which were welded together and painted with rust-resistant paint to form the necessary float for the school. The school was then built and towed to the island. This was the boys' dormitory. Pupils now line up eagerly for school. This boy has just pulled into the parking lot. One thing is sure, these people are now happier. They avoid many of the former diseases which took so many from their tribe. They have a reason to live. And what a transformation. The matted hair is now combed. The brown bodies are clean and free from lice. And quick young minds are learning to read and write. After some 300 years of miserable ignorance, the Uros are getting the opportunity for a better way of life. These people who live in the cruel, cold and harsh beauty of Lake Titicaca are learning to know the one who made the sun, the moon, the stars, and their lovely 2.5 mile lake. In 1531, Spanish adventurers came to this far-away land in search of gold. Led by Pizarro, they advanced from the coast, across the desert and into the Andes Mountains. The Incas allowed them to approach in peace. The visitors were hospitably received. The Inca himself came part way to meet the small band of Spaniards. Pizarro and his adventurers were invited into the Inca camp. They were offered food on vessels of gold and silver. Seeing such wealth, Pizarro's greed welled up. Pizarro determined to take advantage of the unsuspicious simplicity with which the Inca trusted him. So he invited the Inca the next day to be his guest. Next day the Inca took all morning to get ready in his greatest splendour and magnificence for his meeting with Pizarro. Then, preceded by heralds and musicians and attended by the Virgins of the Sun, strewed the road with flowers, the Inca arrived sitting on a throne covered with plates of gold and silver enriched with precious stones carried on the shoulders of his attendants. Pizarro's men were waiting to ambush the Inca. The Peruvians, astonished and defenceless, were cut down in hundreds, and the Inca was seized. At first the Inca could hardly believe what had happened. He was thrown into a small prison cell. Then he saw how greedy were the Spaniards for gold. Pizarro promised the Inca that if his subjects would fill up the room with gold, the Inca would be set free. The Inca sent messages throughout the land. They stripped the temples and palaces. But Pizarro did not free the Inca. In his kindness he decided not to burn him to death but to strangle him. And with the Inca died the empire. It is claimed that the Incas, seeing the greed of the Spaniards, hid most of their gold in underground tunnels, and only 10% of Inca gold was ever seized. This gold was taken in ships headed for Europe, but most of the ships were sunk, and only 10% of that gold ever reached Europe. Still, the gold that did arrive increased Europe's gold wealth by 1,000%. All that wealth did not save Pizarro from death. The descendants of the Incas live today as their ancestors did, but socially and economically they are very poor. The most common trait of the Indian in the Andes is sadness. As the Spaniards tramped through the land looking for gold, one place they missed was Machu Picchu, the city suspended in the clouds. The gorge winds around on the left, twists behind this peak, and turns back to the right. It is thought that the Inca virgins of the palace were finally hustled away to this spot so that the Spaniards would not find them. Most of the graves that have been found are those of females. You round a bend, climb a wall, walk between two stone buildings, and there it is. Suddenly you are aware of a silence so complete you can hear the Urubamba River flowing 2,000 feet below. The silence sharpens your imagination. You can almost hear Pizarro's men marching along the river, searching unsuccessfully for Machu Picchu and its treasure. You mourn as one by one its inhabitants die out, and the jungle slowly covers Machu Picchu for 400 years. It will not be discovered until 1911 by Hiram Bingham. Now you can explore its houses, temples, tombs, peer down from its watchtowers. It is almost as it was when lived in by the children of the sun. The military walls, the round tower, the house compounds and houses, the ceremonial buildings, the flights of thousands of steps which form the steep streets, and the conduits of bright mountain water, and a complicated system of stone water basins, all as they were made. Notice the terraces, formed with astonishing skill, before they drop into sheer precipices. Throughout the area are literally hundreds of miles of stone terracing for ancient agriculture. Hey, what does that chap think he's doing? Well, on the terraces I saw what looked like strawberries. Were they safe to eat? I tried one and waited for half an hour. Then, feeling safe, I was soon on hands and knees for an hour or two, enjoying the biggest feed of strawberries I had ever had. After 400 years. And they taste so good. An iridescent blue butterfly flitted up from the canyon and winged around the sundial. The setting is terrifyingly wild. Mountains miles high vanishing into the sky, notched with narrow ledges, slashed with ravines and bottomless gorges. Waterfalls plunge from the immaculate snowy peaks into the damp, unknown depths of the canyons. So rare is the air that even the llamas are obliged to stop every 10 paces to catch their breath. A vanished civilization set gems in stone, suspended over the abyss. They carved practically vertical stairways up stupendous precipices. Terraces were miraculously inlaid into vertical slopes, perched over the canyon. We ask, how did they ever hoist up heavy carved blocks by the thousands? A high carved niche opens out over the abyss. Under a ridge shaped like the letter I, the rock was levelled and encrusted with carefully joined stone cubes. I tell you, only a daring mountaineer hanging from a rope could possibly reach it. These builder magicians, I tell you, had no sense of the impossible. Note the death-defying terraces perched on the vertical peak behind. There's a great view from your bedroom window, but you wouldn't want to go sleepwalking. For its natural setting, the little city of Machu Picchu far surpasses them all. This wall stone interlocks exactly with all the adjoining stones. Notice how many sides it has. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. And you cannot place a piece of paper or a blade of a knife between them. When someone tries to tell me that they were made smooth to fit together by rubbing the adjoining stones together, I ask, how would you rub 14 sides all together at once? Some blocks of stone in these massive walls weigh as much as 800 tons without cement. In recent times, when earthquakes have wrecked the Spanish and later buildings of this old city of Cuzco, the ponderous ancient walls have stood almost unshaken. Now, the fortress of Sacsayhuaman is a masterpiece of construction. One stone, 38 feet long, 18 feet high, 6 feet thick. Each stone was brought many miles over rugged mountain terrain and then fitted precisely. The quarries are 32 kilometres, 20 miles away, on the other side of a mountain range and a deep river gorge. Now, how those gigantic stones were brought over rugged mountain terrain, then lowered into the canyon, carried across the river, and then hauled up the other canyon wall is anyone's guess, unless the massive blocks were flown there. Now, this perilous walkaway along the face of a sheer cliff has survived repeated earthquakes. Remember that many modern skyscrapers topple during earthquakes. Here's a removable plank preventing enemy crossings. 20 kilometres south, 12 miles south of Lake Titicaca, are the ruins of the old city of Tiwanaku. This Gate of the Sun is one single piece of stone. The whole complex was built with a technical skill embarrassing to us and by a method unknown to us. Blocks of up to 200 tons were manoeuvred over distances up to 90 miles, 140 kilometres. Now, there is an area of jungle in eastern Ecuador from which natives have been carrying out thousands of artefacts belonging to what they describe as great deserted cities. Any outsiders trying to enter this forbidden region may very well be killed by the natives. But what are they bringing out? It's incredible. Here are sheets of wallpaper made of paper-thin gold, silver, and, wait for it, aluminium, which have been torn from the interior walls of long-abandoned, vine-choked buildings. You say, but aluminium has only been in use for the last 150 years. That's right, but these rolls of sheet metal are thousands of years old. They're 15 to 30 feet long, composed of smaller 4-foot sheets artfully riveted together, and every square inch is decorated with intricate designs. These are among 60,000 ancient artefacts now in a museum in Cuenca, Ecuador. They have been declared a national treasure by the Ecuador government. Among the artefacts are also numerous woven copper items which bear a resemblance to the modern automobile radiator. Now, whatever their use, their design does indicate a sophisticated understanding of heat exchange technology. The largest unexplored jungle area in the world is the Amazon basin. This region is so little known that a river tributary 200 miles long, that's 320 kilometres long, was only discovered in recent years, and then only by satellite. The Amazon system comprises 80,000 kilometres of navigable trunk rivers and an estimated 16,000 tributaries. It is still barely explored. It is an immensely beautiful virgin jungle land. Vast and trackless and isolated it is, laced with fast-running rivers that are often dangerous. My friend General Bolivar Pico told me that he flew over this part of the jungle and the natives came out and looked up, shaking their spears wildly at the plane. Pilots have often avoided flying over this area because of the risk should they come down. 4 weeks before my visit, rubbermen crossed the river from their camp to survey a jungle patch for rubber. At night they failed to return. Those at camp went to investigate. The 4 of them had lances through their bodies. They managed to retrieve the corpses and the spears. The reputation of the Jivaros for deadliness goes back 400 years. They caught some Spaniards in 1599 and poured molten gold down their throats. Just a few months before my visit, 2 groups engaged in a savage jungle massacre and practically wiped out each other. These are the most warlike Indians in all the continent. If you should meet a Jivaro on the trail, he will be wearing a short, handmade skirt. Above this, his body will be bare except for painted designs and various ornaments. If he is fully dressed, he will also have on a fur and feather crown. He likes delicately applied face paint in geometric designs. He adorns himself with necklaces and other ornaments. And he's very sensitive about his hair. He cuts it straight across the forehead and lets it grow to about waist length at the back. He wears 3 pigtails. And in the jungle he will usually carry an 8 to 10 foot spear and a shield or a blowgun and poisoned darts. The wound scars on his face and body are the result of head taking raids. The blowgun is from 7 to 10 feet long. It's made of 2 pieces of chonta, neatly grooved and bound together with fibre and pitch. It takes about 2 months to make one. The poison arrows are somewhat like knitting needles. A tuft of kapok cotton on one end makes it glide airtight in the barrel of the gun. The poison, curare, is black. Birds struck with curare darts fall to the ground almost instantly. Monkeys may linger 5 to 30 minutes. Larger animals several hours. Jivaros are accurate with the blowgun to about 40 metres, 135 feet. That's quite a distance, isn't it? The Jivaro man is about 5 feet 3 inches tall. His movements are light and quick. He is suspicious by nature, particularly when his women are concerned. He is also likely to blame a stranger for any illness or other misfortune that may coincide with the newcomer's visit. Marriageable girls wear a small cane lip plug in a hole in the lower lip. Men wear larger plugs in the lobes of their ears. I set out into the forbidding jungles to visit these primitive Indian tribes. As a start, the military flew me into their camp deep within the jungle, where I was to wait for 2 days to obtain native carriers and a guide. Oh, this strange local animal, it's called a kasombo, invaded my room the first night. Before setting out on foot, I assembled a variety of simple goods for the purpose of befriending anyone we might meet. The 2 natives who were to carry my equipment were shown other items which would be left at the camp as a reward to them when the expedition was completed. This was my insurance, so that they would bring me back. I also wore a bulletproof vest in case of poison darts. Eventually we began our journey. Birds filled the jungle with their hysterical melodies. Soon we were perspiring copiously, not for the heat, since the towering, pressing foliage completely blocked the sun most of the time, but for the dank humidity. There were parts where there seemed to be no track at all, but we just pressed through the trees and the tangled interjecting vines. The carriers had to get down on their knees and crawl under some of it. This day we waded 4 rivers and countless small streams and swamps. Even these were overtowered by trees, so we would come upon them quite suddenly. I have been asked, what is the most frightening experience you ever had in the jungle? Well, let me tell you, the most frightening thing is not the wild animals, nor the wild men. The frightening thing is not so much the beetles that are attracted by a campfire and fly into your eye and make you permanently blind. It's not the flies that land all over your body and lay eggs under the skin, which 2 weeks later comes up in lumps everywhere with moving maggots, even under the fingernails and toenails, so that you have to prise them out with tweezers. As a matter of fact, I know of one man who had 200 maggots removed from his body. The most frightening thing is knowing you are lost and you cannot find your way out. I recall the first time this happened to me. A log had fallen over the way. Looking down, I saw lots of little leaves walking along the log. Curious, I bent down to discover that under each leaf was an ant walking. They're known as umbrella ants. They were carrying leaf portions back to their nests. Well, I got out the camera and photographed them. I suppose that took about 20 seconds. But as I turned around to continue the journey through the thick jungle, my companions were nowhere in sight. Neither was there a track. I stood still and listened. No sound. I whistled and listened. No response. Just the silent midday jungle when all nature sleeps. Yet hardly a moment earlier they had been just in front of me. Now I was truly lost. No footprints. No track ahead nor behind. No sound. You can be just a few metres from a riverbank and not even know it. The jungle is like a sponge. It soaks up the sound. Well, I remember looking at my watch. It was 11:30, and I thought, my friends back in Australia will never know how I came to an end in this spot. Now, such incidents as that occurred quite frequently. It is easy to lose another in a matter of just 10 seconds. We came upon a brown, rushing river. There was a native canoe by the bank. We piled into it and out into the rapids. In parts of the river you thread through narrow, rocky channels. You notice the glassy smoothness of the water at your elbow and the racing speed of blobs of foam. You either sweep through safely or you're tumbled into the effervescent waves. You have to sit absolutely still, holding everything valuable high toward your chin. The first rush of water is exhilarating, but as you sweep into a stretch of wild, leaping waves, you turn pale. Where the entire river pours into a churning maelstrom, the boys in the bow swing their paddles madly. There are tense moments. But eventually you are through the rapids, with all their devilish effervescence, whirlpools, and wide expanses of leaping waves. Then, when it is all over, the hard-working native men, relieved that disaster has been averted, relax and burst into giggles. Population is sparse, very sparse. They do not live in villages. Each family has its own compound, living in a single oval hut with up to 40 persons. From one house through the jungle to the next house varied from 2.5 to 10 hours. These people are quite skilled. The door has hinges, top and bottom, cut out of one giant slab of wood. This is truly a vast virgin zoo, where monkeys constantly dance through the high limbs above, and great flocks of rainbow-hued parrots screech a deafening chorus. Puma tracks, said my guide, pointing, an armadillo. Perhaps one was nearby, concealed and watching us. And of course the wily jaguar. This one was asleep, fortunately. We must also be on our guard against the most dangerous jungle of fauna. The snakes, the boa constrictor, the anaconda, and the crocodile. We resumed tramping. Suddenly there appeared this half-naked youth with red painted face. He had a 5-foot-long blowpipe, and he pulled out one of his poison darts. Up there in that tree there were some monkeys and some birds. Hatred, fear and revenge dominate these dear people. Even a death from natural cause is often interpreted as a result of witchcraft from another person. The surviving relations then blame the most likely suspect and plead new revenge. I was made to understand that if anyone in the village suffered an accident or sickness while I was there, they would probably suspect that I had placed a curse on them, and my shrunken head might stay in their village forever. The most important act upon a man's arising each morning is to induce vomiting and recite his hatreds to his sons. The reason for the vomiting is to get rid of any evil substances that have remained within him all through the night. Next comes his morning beer, which his wife has made by chewing large quantities of yucca and spitting the pulp into a jar to ferment. Visitors, incidentally, are obliged to partake of the pre-masticated beer or give offence. Well, I did touch it to my lips, reluctantly. They all watched me closely, but I kept remembering how it had been pre-masticated with corn and saliva to ferment, and many of the women have tuberculosis. The offer of this drink was from a kind heart, but it could be an offer dangerous to accept. Witchcraft, hate and murder take deep roots early in life. Children, as they fall asleep at night, are taught to repeat a list of names of those they must learn to hate. It is a religion of fear and evil spirits. There is no end to the killings for revenge. The miserable part is that they don't necessarily need to kill the very murderer himself. Any relative will do. As a result of fear, their houses are constructed very much like military fortresses. They often put traps under the pathways for their suspected enemies. As one barefoot carrier approached a Hevero clearing, he let out a sudden scream. A needle-sharp palm wood spike was sticking out of the top of his bloodied foot. As I mentioned, each morning the father reminds the children of the various crimes that have been committed against his people, and names the relatives who have been killed. All are told to become worthy of their father and to cultivate bravery and unrelenting revenge. Then comes breakfast. Boiled manioc, which is tapioca, boiled or roasted plantain, which is a cooking potato, as well as fish or meat. Well, I had brought some biscuits with me to give periodically to the natives who carried my bags, and at this particular village I tossed an empty biscuit paper into the fire. Suddenly an old lady jumped up. She thrust her hand into the fire, pulled out the biscuit paper, stamped out the flames with her bare feet, and tenderly examined the piece of paper before hanging it on a wooden hook at the side of the house. You see, this was the first time they had seen paper. When I finished my meal, a lady seized my enamel plate and took it over to the dishwasher. You say, a dishwasher in the jungle? Oh yes, you can see it in the corner of the picture. A four-legged animal licking the plate clean. Then she gave it back to me, ready for the next meal. The meat is allowed to mature. Before long it is covered in little white crawlies and big black ones too. When the men go hunting, they may take a pet parrot with them. When hunting is bad, they will eat it. What a beautiful land. The swift, clear, fast-running river cuts into a 5-story high jungle crammed with animal life. and vegetation so thick that even the animal trails seem invisible to the untrained eye. For a week before a headhunting raid, the men of the household assemble in the hut every night. They develop a plan of attack. They place great faith in visions, which are generated by a drug they drink, as to how to look at the raid, whether it will succeed. The women remain at home, singing and performing ceremonies to increase the chances of victory, but not knowing if they will ever see their husbands again, unless perhaps in miniature. Approaching the enemy house, the attackers have as their main purpose to slaughter as many of their opponents as they can before reinforcements can be summoned by a signal drum. The invaders must approach cautiously because the enemy will have fortified their house by pitfalls, cleverly covered over and containing sharp spikes. Spring-set weapons may also have been installed on the trail in such a way that a mere touch will release a multiple spear, driving as many as 12 one-foot-long wooden spikes through the intruder's body. Now watch this melon. Watch the dart shot in. And a second one. Ultimately the showdown comes. Extreme brutality will follow. Women on the village that is being attacked are always subject to capture, but older women, filled with hatred for the attackers, are likely to make poor wives. The murder is accomplished. The invaders pick up the bodies and cut off the heads. They hurry away from the scene, dripping with blood and with heads dangling at their necks. Hatred, fear and bloodlust now give way to a mood of triumph. A ritual takes place aimed at mastering the dead man's spirit. Shrinking begins by cutting the scalp up the back of the head far enough to peel it off the skull. The skull is disposed of and the remainder of the head is then cooked in hot water with a plant juice. After 2 hours the skin is thick, rubbery and pale yellow. It is cooled on a stick and the scalp is then sewed up. Well, before and after. To further shrink the skin, remove fatty tissue. 3 stones are heated and rolled around separately in the head. Then the head is more than half filled with hot sand many times and rotated. Between treatments, the face is carefully moulded. The head is finally about 1/4 the natural size, that is, about as large as a small orange. A loop is passed through a hole in the top and tied to a stick on the inside so that the head can be hung up. Skewers are stuck through lips and tied with string. Lastly, it is dyed black with charcoal and smoked and polished. Even the ears with lobes pierced are perfect miniatures of the original. Sometimes strings are suspended from the lips. This is the head of a woman. It is rare for a woman to have her head shrunk. Women are usually taken as wives. Now this one is a European head, unmistakably, perhaps that of a German engineer. And this, that of a Spanish priest. You'll notice the circular tonsure on the top of his head. They then dance, feast and strictly diet for months. And finally comes a ceremony to purify the victor further from the evil influences that stick to him as a result of taking and handling the head. The dance is ghastly, the noise is frightful, the participants are deranged by intoxicants and narcotics. The priest takes the killer by the wrist and makes him touch the hair of the victim, saying, "Have courage, do not fear the great serpent." You see, the Hebrews hold the snake in great reverence. There is a dance which has a name, which means the killing of the enemy's soul, and that is so that the spirit will not haunt them. And there is a song with a dismal, howling effect. This process of cleaning and shrinking takes 12 hours with a further 8 hours in smoking the head. I was sleeping when this warrior returned from the hunt. I looked up to find him towering over me and, well, I shuddered. The war paint, poison darts and blowpipes screamed out that this man was a killer. Better be careful. I felt in my bag and drew out a balloon. He squinted at it, chewed it, and pulled on it and looked totally puzzled. Well, his young son came to the rescue, and soon this fierce warrior was prancing around the compound, showing off to everyone how clever he was, actually giggling with delight as he blew it up and let the air scream out. Oh yes, he was now friendly enough. The men, the unmarried and guests, occupy one end of the house. The women and dogs, the other, behind split bamboo walls. As we journeyed, birds were frequently shot out of the trees for food. My companions fired. Nothing happened at first, then a large thudding sound as something fell down from branch to branch. It was a monkey. With sadistic pleasure, my carriers beat it to death. And this really upset me, but there was nothing much I could do. Then, using the monkey's head, they demonstrated to me the scalping process for a human head. It was hideous. They esteem the contents of a monkey's stomach. When mixed with water, it is said to resemble a good fruit drink. I was pleased to take their word for that. Girls of 6 to 12 sometimes enter a token marriage, waiting till full maturity to assume a wife's full duties. The primitive tribes do not have any legends which suggest they evolved from animals. Rather, some of them possess a racial memory of ancestors who lived in great, shining cities, which were once destroyed, and the survivors went bush. Originally, these people were highly civilized. They also believed in a creator who made heaven and earth. They also believed that there was a time in the past when mankind was in harmony with the creator, when animals were neither wild nor harmful, when there was no rivalry or enmity between men, when there was plenty, security, harmony, and right living on earth in all directions. They used to believe that that happened in the past. However, there had been a departure from harmony with the Creator, from his laws which were based on love. And now they were separated from the life-giver, and the consequence was the process of death. But they also believed in the Creator's love for human beings, and in a rescue plan he had promised them, that a mighty one would come down who was to assume human nature and die for mankind, and eventually restore everything that was lost. To help mankind understand the rescue plan, a teaching device had been set up. It became known as the sacrificial system. The requirement was that when a person was sorry for his wrongs, he would take an innocent lamb and kill it with his own hand. The message was that just as an innocent animal now died, so at some future date an innocent deliverer would die for guilty man and free mankind from the curse of death. They also believed that the spilling of his blood would bring cleansing and forgiveness to those who would accept his sacrifice. The sacrificial rite was an act of faith in future deliverance. Archaeology reveals that this sacrificial system was handed down and became part of the culture of all nations in the beginning. However, gradually corruption set in. Gradually the universal worship of the Creator who was behind the sun, moon and stars degenerated into veneration of these visible heavenly bodies themselves. Sun worship became widespread. Here is a Central American sun emblem with the circle of the sun and the rays of light in the form of a cross. And later, animal sacrifice became perverted into human sacrifice. The knowledge of a loving God who would rescue mankind was lost. It was replaced with the notion that the Creator was a cruel tyrant who needed to be appeased. In their sun worship, the Jivaro Indians revere Mount Sangay. Long ago, we are told, God descended upon Mount Sinai and spoke before a whole nation his law of love. His very presence caused the earth to tremble, and lightning flashed and thunder roared. The whole mountain appeared to be on fire with his divine presence. In the South American Andes is a mountain which smokes with fire. It is a volcano, and it has been given a name suspiciously like Mount Sinai. They called it Mount Sangay, the mountain of the god. And because these people, with a perversion of the original truth, are sun worshippers, they regard Mount Sangay with fire to be an earthly counterpart of the fiery sun. To this smoking mountain, the natives sacrifice a pig. And below this pig you will notice a chicken. After they have sacrificed the pig, they kill a chicken and sprinkle the blood of the chicken over their legs just in case they have incurred some guilt by killing the pig. What do we see here? In this chicken's blood that cleanses them from sin, what is this but a carryover from the original knowledge of an atonement, a reconciliation by blood? History shows us that when a nation turns its back on God, then the nation goes down. The whole civilization starts to disintegrate, spiritually, technologically, physically. Originally, these people enjoyed a high, sophisticated culture. Their religious ideals went down, and the collapse of the civilization followed. Could there be a warning in this for us today? The pig skin is now stretched out to dry. On the second to last day before returning to the army jungle outpost, I gave one poor shirt its final loving wash. While gliding down a river with the current being rapid, the return trip is tediously slow as the natives labour with long bamboo poles to push the narrow dugouts foot by foot, stroke by stroke, upriver against the rushing current. But we did come out, or you would not be watching this video. Friends, due to the exploding interest worldwide in these and other discoveries by our teams,
We have prepared materials that can be shared with your friends and your neighbours. The book Dead Men's Secrets is the result of up to 12 years' research in over 30 countries. Surprising discoveries in lost cities of the dead. Seafloor, jungle and desert sands give up 1,000 forgotten secrets. Technology that vanished. What wiped it out? Did the ancients know too much? Who mapped Australia thousands of years before Australia was discovered? The Ark Conspiracy. Cover-ups, betrayals and miracles. This is the cloak and dagger story behind the discovery of Noah's Ark in the mountains of Turkey. The attempts to suppress the news. Why some people reject the discovery. And the solid evidence that this may very well be the real thing. A true life thriller. Archaeology at its most exciting. Sting of the Scorpion. Astrology exposed. The truth behind star names and signs. Ancient civilizations believed that a serpent, which represented the devil, took control of the world. They believed that a virgin's baby would fight the serpent, defeat him, and bring peace, life and happiness back to mankind. The pictures on the sky map were used to describe that story, and not to tell people's fortunes through the stars. The names of the stars, as well as the star sign pictures, told that story. Curse of the Hatana Gods. This one is a stunning real-life adventure. One of the most isolated islands on Earth is Rotuma, ancient home to a race of giants. But Rotuma shielded a sinister secret for which there was no scientific explanation. They called it the Curse of Hatana. The evidence for the ancient giants and the incredible story of a face-to-face encounter with the curse is the story of this book. Sinai's Exciting Secrets. This is a compilation of information concerning the existence and discovery of the true Mount Sinai in Arabia. Do you believe in miracles? Then catch the spy story that's in this book, which is probably one of the most exciting stories of the 20th century. It's in a spiral-bound format with information from quite a number of sources and recent developments that have been taking place in the country as a result of the discovery. Every 3 months we produce a regular newsletter which goes worldwide into many countries. This deals with the recent developments and new materials which are continually being produced by our team, plus other significant archaeological finds around the world, and news of other important world developments relating to the coming New World Order. If I had to recommend any particular publication, this would be it. This is the one that keeps you up to date with what is happening. We also produce spiral-bound volumes of the previous issues, back issues of Update International Newsletter. We at the moment have 2 books, Back Issues Volume 1, which contains the first 10 issues of Update International, and Back Issues Volume number 2, which contains Update Issues 11 to 20. These cover all the discoveries in which myself, Jonathan Gray, and my associates are involved, with extra information as well as ancient giants, dinosaurs, mysteries of ancient South America, surprises in the Grand Canyon, Chinese pyramids, ancient Egyptians in Australia, lost technology, and much more. Scores of photos, maps and diagrams. And there's also an index in the second volume to all questions and topics found in both volumes. Now, among the videos which we have available are the series Surprising Discoveries numbers 1 and 2. The first video runs for 2 hours with 3 subjects. Part 1 has Noah's Ark been found, the Noah's Ark story. Part 2, Lost Secrets of the Ancients, ancient technology. And Part 3, Into the Forbidden Valley, trip to Noah's gravesite. Surprising Discoveries number 2 runs for 2.5 hours. Part 1 contains the lost cities of Sodom and Gomorrah, Dead Sea sites. Part 2, In Search of Pharaoh's Lost Army, the Red Sea Crossing. And Part 3, Smuggled Out of the Desert, the real Mount Sinai story with live footage. And finally, on the Ark of the Covenant subject, we have a book of 600 pages which deals with the subject of this video but goes even further. When Jonathan Gray set out to prove an amateur archaeologist's claims, he never counted on being targeted for murder or facing political pressure to keep a major discovery underground. Fast-moving, spellbinding, well-documented, this book reveals forgotten voyages, secret tunnels and acts of intrigue. The CD is for computers with Macintosh and Windows. It reports on the Ark of the Covenant but goes even further, with Noah's Ark, Sodom and Gomorrah, the Red Sea crossing and the Mount Sinai discoveries. In this CD there are up to 8 hours of interactive viewing, including 1 hour of exclusive new video footage. And it provides on the internet an international online conference for discussion and debate.